The camera was found inside her locked car, but the footage on it was filmed 2 miles into the forest. An hour later, she was supposed to be safely back at the trailhead. And in the final 30 seconds of that footage, something is standing at the edge of the trees, watching her. It doesn't move, it doesn't hide, it just watches. Cecilia Mangrove was never found, but before I show you what she filmed that evening, I need to tell you something about this mountain, because Cecilia was not the first person it took. In 1970, 3 hunters entered the same forest on the eastern face of Mount Marin. Their gear was found days later, arranged in a careful, deliberate pile in the clearing. Their rifles, their clothes, their food, sorted, organized, displayed, as if something, with patience and intention, had cataloged everything these men owned. The hunters themselves were never found. Before I show you the footage, you need to understand who Cecilia Mangrove was, because this is not a story about someone who made a mistake. This is a story about someone who did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. Cecilia was 27 years old. She held a wilderness first aid certification. She had completed 4 multi-day solo treks before this one, in terrain far more demanding than Mount Marin. She knew how to read fog, how to navigate without signal, how to handle a wildlife encounter, including bear spray deployment, from a distance of under 20 feet. She knew exactly, step by step, how to survive a bear attack. But the footage shows she never reached for her bear spray, not once. She just stood there and watched. Her sister described her this way: Cecilia didn't fear the forest knew her. That line, when you've seen the footage, means something very different than it used to. In late August, Cecilia drove to the base of Mount Marin, a remote 2,700-meter peak in the interior of British Columbia, surrounded by dense, largely undeveloped forest that most hikers never touch. She packed carefully: a tent, 2 sleeping bags, canned food, a folding knife, bear spray. The bear spray that footage shows she never touched. On the morning of September 4th, Cecilia parked her car, walked into the trees, and began recording. What she recorded over the next several hours is the reason we're here. The early footage on her camera is exactly what you'd expect: trail conditions, cloud cover, elevation notes recorded into the lens as she walked. You can hear the cicadas, that constant electric hum of late summer, buzzing in every direction, like the forest talking to itself. Everything completely ordinary. And then the first moment that doesn't fit. It's small, easy to miss. About 90 minutes into the footage, Cecilia pauses mid-step on the trail. Not to check her map, not to catch her breath. She just stops. And without raising the camera, without turning around, she goes completely still. Like she already knows something is behind her. Like turning around would make it real. She holds that stillness for nearly 8 seconds. Then she keeps walking. She doesn't mention it. She doesn't look back. She just continues down the trail as if nothing happened. But her pace is slightly different now. Tighter, more controlled. The kind of walking someone does when they're trying very hard to look like they're not afraid. Then, sometime in the late afternoon, the footage changes. Not dramatically, just slightly. About 20 minutes after that first pause, the camera catches something at the edge of the frame. Not the center of the shot, not where Cecilia is looking, the far left edge. A shadow crosses between 2 trees. Lateral movement. Gone in less than a second. Cecilia doesn't react. Either she didn't see it, or she did, and she had already decided not to acknowledge it out loud. Then the sounds start changing. There is a moment where Cecilia's footsteps and the ambient forest noise don't quite match. Like the echo is arriving slightly wrong. Like the space around her has changed shape somehow. It sounds like nothing at first. But once you notice it, you can't unhear it. The cicadas don't fade out. They vanish like a light switch flipped in a dark room. One moment, everywhere. The next, gone. In the earlier footage, birds, wind, insects. In the footage after that silence falls nothing. Not quiet, not peaceful, nothing. You can hear Cecilia's footsteps change without her seeming to notice, slower, more deliberate, like her body had already registered something her mind hadn't named yet. At one point, she stops completely on the trail. The camera points at the ground. For 11 seconds, she doesn't move. Then, quietly, she says something under her breath that the audio barely picks up. Something is following me. Not a question, a statement. But that's not the strangest part. It wasn't the silence that stopped the search investigators cold when they reviewed this footage 3 days later. It was something else entirely. Something that no one noticed until a researcher watched the final 30 seconds of the walk footage for the 4th time. The camera, in those last 30 seconds, wasn't being held by Cecilia. The branches begin before she acknowledges them, not at ground level. Higher up, the sound of something large redistributing its weight through underbrush. Not stumbling into branches, but moving through them, the way something does when it knows exactly where its body is in space. Then, 3 hard knocks from somewhere uphill and to her left. Clean, deliberate, a pause. Then 2 more, from a different direction entirely. 2 sources, 2 locations. And this is where everything starts to break. Because if you listen to those knocks carefully, the timing between them is not random. There is a rhythm to it, a pattern that suggests the 2 sources are not acting independently. They are communicating, coordinating. 2 points in the dark forest, exchanging information about a woman standing alone on a trail between them. You can hear Cecilia's breathing shift, not panic, not yet, just that specific deepening that happens when the body starts preparing for something the mind is still trying to explain away. She whispers it again. It's still there. Then something else. In the footage, approximately 40 seconds after those knocks, there is a moment where Cecilia's breathing and the ambient sound of the forest fall into an almost identical rhythm. Her inhale, a creak from somewhere off frame. Her exhale, silence from the trees. Back and forth, as if whatever is out there is pacing itself to her, matching her, watching her closely enough to time its own stillness to her breath. She doesn't seem to notice, but her hand tightens on the camera. You can see it in the shake. Bigfoot researcher Dr. Ellen Voss, who has spent 15 years cataloging encounter reports across the Pacific Northwest, has noted one behavioral detail that appears consistently across credible sightings. The silence doesn't fall all at once. It falls in layers. Birds first, then insects. Then, finally, the wind stops moving through the upper canopy, as if the forest itself folds closed around a presence before any human eye can locate it. Cecilia had been in mountain forests since she was 6 years old. She knew exactly what silence sounded like. And this is the detail no one talks about. In the footage, Cecilia never looks directly at where the sounds are coming from. She keeps the camera slightly angled away, like she's trying to see it without letting it know she's looking. Like some part of her understands, instinctively, that direct attention might change something, that being seen watching is different from watching. And whatever is in those trees, she doesn't want it to know she's tracking it. We are about to look at the first clip from her camera. Pay close attention to the upper left of the frame. Most people miss the movement on the first watch, but once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. The first significant visual appears 40 minutes before her final recording. Cecilia has stopped walking entirely. The camera is steady too. Steady, the kind of stillness that comes not from calm, but from a person who has made themselves stop moving because moving feels dangerous. And there, in the upper left of the frame, between 2 large trunks, something moves. Not wind, not a settling branch. A shape, dark, upright, moving laterally, not stumbling, but stepping the way something moves when it is choosing its footing deliberately. When it knows the ground and doesn't need to look down at it, it disappears behind a tree. It is in frame for less than 3 seconds. But 3 things are visible to anyone watching carefully. First, the height. The head of the shape is level with a branch that sits 6 feet off the ground, and it is not standing fully upright. It appears to be crouching. Second, the shoulder width. Disproportionate. Too broad for the visible torso. Not the profile of any animal in this region that moves on 4 legs. Third, it stops behind the tree, and the section of forest where it disappeared holds completely still. Cecilia keeps the camera trained on that exact spot for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Not moving, not speaking, waiting. It never reemerges. But here is what most people miss on the first watch. Approximately 90 seconds after the shape disappears behind that tree, the branches directly above where it was standing move, not a gust catching the upper canopy. The specific cluster of branches, low and dense, above that exact hiding spot. They shift once and then settle, as if something standing beneath them has changed its posture slightly, has shifted its weight, is still there, still watching. just no longer visible. And then, 20 seconds after that branch movement, something appears at the far right edge of the frame. Half a second, maybe less. A shape, much closer than the first one, darker, more still. Already they're not arriving, not moving, just suddenly present, as if it had been standing just outside the frame the entire time, and simply moved slightly into it. Blink, and you miss it completely. But if you pause it, if you hold that single frame, the shape is unmistakable. There were not one of them in those trees. There were at least two. But what was captured 22 minutes later, in the final clip on her camera, was not a shadow, not a shape between trees, not something that disappeared. The second clip begins without warning. No narration from Cecilia, no context, no introduction, just the camera, on, pointed into the trees. And then, at the tree line you see it. A figure, standing fully upright, facing the camera directly, not moving, not hidden, not fleeing, standing, as if it has been there for some time and has decided it no longer needs to hide. Now, here is the detail that doesn't leave you. Before it steps, before there is any movement at all, there is a pause. 1, maybe 2 full seconds where the figure is completely motionless and Cecilia's breathing is the only sound on the recording. And in that pause, the head moves. Slightly, almost imperceptibly, a slow tilt the way something does when it is adjusting its angle of observation. When it wants a clearer look at something, it tilts its head at her. Not like an animal reading a threat, like something reading a person. The shoulders are extraordinary, wide and dense, with arms that hang far below where human anatomy ends. The kind of proportion that makes your brain keep recalculating, because what you're seeing doesn't resolve into anything you've cataloged before. The head sits low between the shoulders, almost no visible neck, and the eyes 2 dull points of reflected light, catching the last of the daylight, like 2 coins at the bottom of dark water, watching. Cecilia doesn't speak. There are no words on this clip, only breathing, and you can hear, in that breathing, the exact moment her body makes a decision her mind may not have consciously approved yet. It slows, it deepens, not panic, something older than panic. Something ancient and animal that has already run its calculation and arrived at an answer she doesn't want. She takes 1 slow step backward on the trail, then another, and in the half second between those 2 steps, she hesitates, like she's thinking, like some part of her is still trying to find the rational explanation, still trying to make this something she can name and file away and drive home from. Then the figure takes 1 step toward her, not fast, not aggressive, 1 slow, deliberate step. The step of something that has made a decision. The clip ends. That is the last recording on Cecilia Mangrove's camera. The timestamp reads September 4th at 6:47 inches the evening. 3 days later, investigators found that camera inside her locked car at the trailhead. Cecilia was not with it. Her sister filed the missing persons report on September 7th. She had tried calling. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. Cecilia always checked in, even from areas with weak signal, even when tired, even when she was a day behind schedule. The silence itself was the first sign something was wrong. Her sister said later, "I knew before I filed the report, because Cecilia didn't go quiet. Cecilia never went quiet. If her phone was dead, she'd find a payphone. If there was no signal, she'd drive until she had one." The silence wasn't a bad sign. The silence was the answer. There was one more detail that didn't come out until weeks later. Cecilia's last message to her sister was sent at 6:02 that evening, 45 minutes before the final footage was recorded. She said, "Heading back to the car soon. Something feels off today. Tell you about it when I'm home." She never sent another message, but she did return to the car. The footage proves that. She came back, she locked her phone and camera inside, and then for reasons no one has been able to explain, she walked back into the forest, at dusk, without her phone, without her keys, without any way to call for help or drive herself out. Why does a woman who texts her sister that something feels off return to the safety of her car and then choose to go back in? Investigators reached her vehicle that morning, locked, undisturbed, parked exactly where she had left it, inside her phone, her camera, her car keys. She had no way to drive away, even if she wanted to. An experienced hiker doesn't separate herself from her phone and keys unless she didn't choose to leave them behind, unless leaving wasn't a decision she made. The search that followed was extensive. 3 helicopters, 50 flights, RCMP ground teams, volunteers covering every trail on the eastern face, search dogs working the forest floor from 4 entry points, 2,000 combined hours over 10 days. They found nothing. No tent, no sleeping bag, no equipment, no Cecilia. One detail stood out from the search logs. A trained tracking dog, working a section of trail approximately 2 kilometers from the trailhead, froze mid-stride, trembled, and refused to move forward. Despite repeated commands from its handler, experienced handlers know what that behavior means. It doesn't mean the dog is confused. It means the dog has decided, with full animal certainty, that what is ahead of it is something it will not walk toward. The official search was suspended in October. Her family hired a private mountaineering team the following spring. They found nothing either. But what Cecilia's family learned, when investigators shared the full case history of Mount Meron, was the detail that changed everything. Because this mountain had done this before. 3 theories have been put forward for what happened to Cecilia Mangrove. Theory 1, lost or fallen. Mount Meron is technically demanding. Fog arrives fast. Temperatures drop sharply at altitude after dark. But Cecilia was certified. She had navigated worse terrain alone. And the items in her car, her phone, her camera, her keys, were not accidentally left behind. Those items being inside a locked vehicle after footage was recorded 2 miles away means she returned to that car after her final recording, and then went back into the forest, without her phone, at dusk. Here is the contradiction that this theory cannot answer. She texted her sister at 6:02 saying she was heading back. She was at her car, we know that, because her phone and camera are inside it. She had done everything right. She was 20 minutes from driving away. And then she walked back in. That is not the behavior of someone who got lost. That is the behavior of someone who was drawn back, or who felt they had no choice. Theory 2, animal attack. Black bears and cougars inhabit this region, but fatal wildlife attacks leave evidence: blood, disturbed ground, scattered belongings. Search teams found none of that. And Cecilia had bear spray she never reached for. Not a trembling hand reaching for it and failing. Not spray discharged and dropped. Never touched. Whatever she was looking at in those final frames was not something her training told her bear spray would help with. And here is what no one can reconcile with an animal attack. 2,000 hours of searching across 10 days. Helicopters, trained dogs, an entire mountain grid searched by experienced teams. Animals leave traces. Predator attacks leave evidence that experienced search teams find. They found nothing, not a single trace. Theory 3, the footage. British Columbia accounts for nearly 30% of all documented Bigfoot encounter reports in Canada. The behavioral patterns on Cecilia's camera, coordinated knocking from multiple directions, progressive forest silence, the biomechanical profile of the figure match what field researchers have documented across decades of credible encounters. The figure that stepped toward her camera did not behave like a startled animal. It behaved like something that had been watching, assessing, and had finally made a decision. And the coordinated behavior, 2 presences, moving in sync, timing their approach, going silent together, that is not the behavior of a solitary creature reacting to a surprise encounter. That is organized. That is deliberate. That is something operating with a level of strategic patience that most large predators simply do not exhibit. Now, the history of this mountain. In 1970, I told you that 3 hunters entered the eastern face of Mount Meron and didn't come back. Here is what I didn't tell you yet. When the search team reached their campsite, the lead investigator wrote in his official report that he stood at the edge of the clearing, looked at what was arranged there, and didn't speak for almost a full minute. Their rifles were stacked parallel, evenly spaced, like someone had lined them up by hand. Their clothing was folded. Their food cans were sorted by size, smallest to largest in a row along a log. Not scattered by weather, not displaced by animals. Arranged, with patience, with intention, with an organizational logic that implied whoever did this understood the concept of order. Of the hunters themselves, nothing, ever. 2 disappearances. Same mountain, 50 years apart, both without remains, both with evidence of something deliberate, something structured, in what was left behind. Local residents gave the Eastern Trail a name a long time ago, the Shadow Trail, the old-timers said the mountain watches, and sometimes it chooses who won't return. Cecilia's sister, when she was told about the 1,970 case, said something quietly that no one in the room knew how to respond to. That doesn't make me think it wasn't real. That makes me think it's been there the whole time, just waiting for someone else to walk in. Cecilia Mangrove has never been found. Her family posts on social media every year on the anniversary of September 4th. Her sister checks the missing persons database every month. The mountain has not given anything back. The footage from her camera has been reviewed by multiple researchers. None of them have offered an explanation that accounts for everything in that final frame. Not misidentification, not costume, not a trick of failing light. Something was standing at that tree line. Something that had been watching Cecilia long enough to stop hiding. I've watched that final clip many times now, and the thing that stays with me is not the shape of it, it's the stillness. The complete, patient, unhurried stillness of something that has been doing this for a very long time, and knows, with absolute certainty, that it is not the one who needs to be afraid. There are people who will say there is a logical explanation for everything in this video, and maybe there is. But here is what I keep coming back to. If something like this has been moving through these forests for decades, choosing who it watches, deciding who comes back and who doesn't, then the question was never whether it's real. The question is this: how many times in your life have you stood at the edge of the trees at dusk and felt that slow, rising animal certainty that something in the dark had already noticed you? How many of those times were you right? Cecilia Mangrove walked into those trees on September 4th. She filmed what she found, and she never came out. If you've been on the Cascade Trails or the Coast Range and felt something you couldn't explain, it's in the comments. I read every one. The hunters from 1,970, their full story, the search report, the arranged gear, and the detail the lead investigator refused to put in writing that video is already done.